Sarah walked into the military base gym with her head held high, but her stomach twisted with familiar anxiety. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as soldiers in matching PT gear stretched and chatted before the morning workout. She had been dreading this day for weeks, knowing that her new assignment meant joining the regular physical training sessions with her unit. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez was already barking orders to the early arrivals, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Sarah had heard about Rodriguez from other soldiers. He was known for being tough, but fair, pushing everyone to their limits, regardless of rank or background. His reputation preceded him, and Sarah knew he wouldn't tolerate any excuses or special treatment. As the clock struck 0600 hours, Rodriguez blew his whistle and called everyone to attention. The 30 soldiers in the gym immediately formed neat rows, their boots clicking against the polished floor. Sarah found her place in the back row, hoping to blend in with the crowd. "All right, listen up," Rodriguez shouted, his voice cutting through the morning air. "Today, we're doing a full circuit training session. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and a 3-mile run to finish. I don't want to hear any complaints or sob stories. Everyone participates. Everyone gives their best effort." Sarah's heart sank as she heard the list of exercises. She knew what was coming next, and her hands unconsciously moved to touch her lower back through her PT shirt. The fabric felt rough against her fingertips, a constant reminder of the reality she tried so hard to hide from her fellow soldiers. The first exercise was push-ups, and Sarah watched as the soldiers around her dropped to the ground in perfect formation. She hesitated for a moment, her mind racing through possible alternatives, but there was no way around it. She had to at least try to participate without drawing attention to herself. Lowering herself to the ground, Sarah felt the familiar sharp pain shoot across her back as she attempted her first push-up. The sensation was like tiny needles piercing her skin, but she gritted her teeth and pushed through 3 repetitions before her body refused to cooperate any further. The metal fragments embedded beneath her skin seemed to shift and grind against her muscles with each movement. "Come on, Martinez," Rodriguez called out, noticing her struggle. "I've seen grandmothers do better push-ups than that. Get your form together. And give me 10 more. Sarah tried to comply, but her body betrayed her. The pain was becoming unbearable, and she could feel her strength giving out completely. She managed 2 more weak attempts before collapsing onto the mat, her breathing heavy and labored. Rodriguez walked over, his expression a mixture of frustration and disappointment. "What's the matter? Martinez? Did you spend too much time at the bar last night, instead of preparing for PT?" The other soldiers had stopped their exercises to watch the interaction, and Sarah could feel their eyes on her. Some looked curious, others appeared annoyed that their workout was being interrupted by her apparent lack of effort. She wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm sorry, Staff Sergeant," Sarah managed to say between breaths. "I'm having some back issues today. Maybe I could do modified exercises, or help with equipment instead." Rodriguez's expression hardened, and Sarah immediately knew she had said the wrong thing. His voice rose so that everyone in the gym could hear clearly. "Back issues? Are you kidding me right now, Martinez? You're 26 years old, not 66. What kind of back issues could you possibly have?" Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment as snickers rippled through the group of soldiers. She wanted to explain, to tell him the truth about her condition, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain something so complicated in front of all these people? How could she make them understand without revealing details she had worked so hard to keep private? "Everyone deals with aches and pains," Rodriguez continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's part of being a soldier. We don't get to skip training because we have a little backache from sleeping wrong. This isn't a spa vacation. This is the United States Army." The other soldiers began to resume their exercises, but Sarah could still feel their judgmental glances. She heard whispered comments about her being soft or looking for easy ways out. The reputation she had worked so hard to build as a competent soldier was crumbling before her eyes. "I understand that, Staff Sergeant," Sarah said quietly, trying to maintain her composure. "But this isn't just a simple ache. It's more complicated than that." Rodriguez threw his hands up in exasperation. More complicated? What could be so complicated about a backache? Did you pull a muscle reaching for the TV remote? Did you strain something lifting your coffee cup? His mocking tone made Sarah's face burn even hotter. She clenched her fists at her sides, fighting the urge to either run from the room or snap back at him. Neither option would help her situation, but the humiliation was becoming overwhelming. "I've been in the army for 15 years, Rodriguez continued, playing to his audience now. "I've seen every excuse in the book. I've heard about mysterious injuries that only show up during PT. I've listened to sob stories about conditions that somehow never interfere with weekend activities, but always seem to affect military training." Sarah bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. She knew he was just doing his job, trying to maintain discipline and standards in his unit, but his words cut deeper than he could possibly understand. If only he knew what she had been through, what she carried with her every single day. "Tell you what, Martinez," Rodriguez said, his tone becoming even more condescending. "Since your back is so delicate, why don't you sit this one out? You can watch everyone else work hard while you rest on the bench. Maybe next time you'll think twice before coming up with creative excuses." The dismissal was worse than the yelling. Sarah felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes, but she refused to give Rodriguez or anyone else the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had survived much worse than this public humiliation, though it didn't make the current moment any less painful. As Sarah walked toward the bench, she could hear Rodriguez addressing the rest of the group. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, people. The moment things get a little challenging, some soldiers look for the easy way out. They come up with mysterious conditions and complicated excuses instead of pushing through like real warriors." The other soldiers nodded in agreement, and Sarah could see the judgment in their eyes as she passed by them. She had become the example of everything they weren't supposed to be: weak, unreliable, and full of excuses. The irony was almost too much to bear. Sitting on the cold metal bench, Sarah watched as her unit completed their workout. Every laugh, every successful exercise, every moment of camaraderie felt like another reminder of how isolated she had become. She thought about all the times she had pushed herself beyond her limits, all the pain she had endured in silence, all the sacrifices she had made for her country, but none of that mattered now. All anyone could see was a soldier who couldn't complete a simple workout, someone who made excuses instead of meeting expectations. The truth of her situation was far more complex, but truth seemed irrelevant in the face of perception. As the session continued, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't keep living this way, hiding her reality while being judged for its consequences. Something had to change, even if it meant revealing things she had never intended to share. The question was whether she had the courage to show Rodriguez and everyone else exactly why she couldn't do push-ups like everyone else. The workout ended with Rodriguez dismissing the group, but not before making one final comment. "Remember, people, the Army doesn't have time for soldiers who can't handle basic physical requirements. We need warriors, not patients looking for sympathy." Sarah remained on the bench as the gym emptied out, her mind racing with possibilities and fears about what would happen next. 3 days had passed since the humiliating incident in the gym, and Sarah could feel the weight of her reputation changing throughout the base. Soldiers who used to greet her warmly now barely made eye contact. During meals in the cafeteria, conversations would quiet when she approached, and she often found herself eating alone at tables that used to be full of friendly faces. The gossip had spread quickly through the unit. She overheard fragments of conversations in hallways and break rooms, stories about the new soldier who couldn't handle basic PT, who made up elaborate excuses to avoid doing her share of the work. Each whispered comment felt like a small knife twisting in her chest. Rodriguez had made sure everyone understood his position on the matter. During a unit meeting, the day after the gym incident, he had used Sarah's situation as a teaching moment, without mentioning her by name. He spoke about the importance of mental toughness, about soldiers who let their team down by looking for easy ways out of difficult situations. Sarah sat in the back row during that meeting, watching as heads nodded in agreement with Rodriguez's words. She knew they were all thinking about her, even though Rodriguez was careful not to point her out directly. The message was clear. She was now the example of what not to be. On Thursday morning, Sarah received notice that she was expected to attend another PT session. Her stomach churned as she read the memo. Knowing that skipping would only make things worse for her reputation, she had spent the previous 3 nights lying awake, debating whether to request a meeting with Rodriguez to explain her situation privately. But each time she considered it, fear held her back. What if he didn't believe her? What if he thought she was making up an even more elaborate excuse? What if the truth made things worse instead of better? The medical documentation of her condition was classified at a level that would require significant paperwork to access, and she wasn't sure Rodriguez would be willing to go through that process. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, matching Sarah's mood as she walked toward the gym. She had decided to try a different approach. She would attempt to participate as much as possible, even if it meant enduring incredible pain. Maybe if she showed enough effort, Rodriguez would ease up on his criticism. The gym was buzzing with the usual pre-workout energy when Sarah arrived. Soldiers were stretching, checking equipment, and chatting about weekend plans. The atmosphere felt lighter than it had earlier in the week. But Sarah noticed how conversations stopped when she entered the room. Rodriguez was setting up exercise stations around the gym, his movements sharp and efficient. He looked up when Sarah approached, his expression neutral, but not welcoming. "Martinez," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "I hope you're feeling better today. No more mysterious back problems, I assume?" The question was clearly intended to be heard by the soldiers nearby, and Sarah could feel their attention focusing on her response. She straightened her shoulders and tried to project confidence she didn't feel. "I'll do my best, Staff Sergeant. That's all I ask for," Rodriguez replied. But his tone suggested he expected her to fall short again. "Today we're doing circuit training again, but I've added some additional challenges. Pull-ups, rope climbing, and bear crawls across the gym floor. I want to see everyone push themselves beyond their comfort zones." Sarah's heart sank as she heard the exercise list. Each activity would put tremendous stress on her back and shoulders, areas where the shrapnel had caused the most damage. But she was determined not to give Rodriguez any more ammunition to use against her. The first station was rope climbing, and Sarah watched as soldier after soldier scaled the thick rope with relative ease. When her turn came, she gripped the rope tightly and began to pull herself upward. The pain hit immediately, sharp and intense, as the embedded metal fragments shifted under the stress. She made it about 3 feet up the rope before her body refused to cooperate any further. Her grip began to fail, and she slid back down to the mat with a thud that echoed through the quiet gym. The other soldiers were watching, and she could see disappointment and frustration in their faces. "Come on, Martinez," Rodriguez called out. "I've seen children climb higher than that at summer camp. What's your excuse this time?" Sarah gritted her teeth and tried again, but the result was the same. Her body simply couldn't handle the stress being placed on her damaged muscles and tissues. Each attempt sent waves of pain through her back and shoulders that made her vision blur around the edges. "I'm sorry, Staff Sergeant," she said, stepping away from the rope. "I don't think I can complete this exercise today." Rodriguez's expression darkened, and Sarah could see his patience finally running out completely. The other soldiers had stopped their own exercises to watch the confrontation, and the gym fell silent except for the humming of the overhead lights. "You don't think you can complete it?" Rodriguez repeated, his voice rising with each word. "What exactly do you think you're getting paid for, Martinez? We're not running a charity here. We're training soldiers who need to be ready for combat situations." Sarah felt her cheeks burning as every eye in the room focused on her. She wanted to explain, to make them understand that she wasn't making excuses or looking for easy ways out. But how could she possibly convey the complexity of her situation without revealing classified information about her past missions? "I know that, Staff Sergeant," she said quietly. "I'm trying my best, but my back injury is more serious than I initially indicated." Rodriguez threw his hands up in exasperation, playing to his audience of watching soldiers. "More serious? How convenient that this injury keeps getting worse every time we have PT. Tell me, Martinez, Does this mysterious condition affect your ability to go out on weekends? Does it prevent you from carrying groceries or lifting luggage? The mocking questions hit their mark, and Sarah could see some of the other soldiers smirking or rolling their eyes. She was becoming a joke to them, a cautionary tale about soldiers who couldn't meet the basic requirements of military service. Actually, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, it does affect those things too. Rodriguez stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. I've had enough of this, Martinez. I've been patient with your creative excuses, but my patience has run out. Either you participate fully in PT like every other soldier in this unit, or you need to find a different career path. The ultimatum hung in the air like a threat. Sarah knew that Rodriguez had the power to make her life very difficult if she continued to underperform in his eyes. Poor PT evaluations could affect her career advancement, her assignments, and ultimately, her ability to serve in the military at all. But she also knew that pushing herself beyond her physical limitations could cause permanent damage to her already compromised body. The shrapnel embedded in her back and shoulders wasn't going anywhere, and aggravating the surrounding tissue could lead to complications that would end her military career anyway. I understand your position, Staff Sergeant, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. But I need you to understand that this isn't a choice I'm making. This is a medical reality that I'm dealing with. Rodriguez's laugh was harsh and dismissive. Medical reality? Where's your medical documentation then? Where are the doctor's orders restricting your activity? If this condition is so serious, surely you have paperwork to back up these claims. The question hit at the heart of Sarah's dilemma. The medical records related to her injury were classified due to the nature of the mission where she had been wounded. Accessing them would require going through proper channels and revealing details about operations that were supposed to remain secret. The documentation exists, Sarah said carefully, but it requires special clearance to access due to the circumstances surrounding my injury. This response only seemed to fuel Rodriguez's skepticism. Special clearance? Classified medical records? Martinez? Do you hear yourself right now? These excuses are getting more elaborate by the day. The other soldiers were openly laughing now, and Sarah could feel her last shred of dignity slipping away. She had reached the point where she had to make a choice. Continue enduring this humiliation, or take action that would change everything. I know how it sounds, she said, her voice growing stronger despite the pain and embarrassment. But some injuries aren't simple to explain or easy to understand. Rodriguez shook his head in disgust. Enough. I don't want to hear any more creative stories about classified injuries or special circumstances. You're going to complete these exercises like everyone else, or you're going to face the consequences of failing to meet military standards. The moment had arrived when Sarah had to decide how much more she was willing to endure. Looking around the gym, at the faces of her fellow soldiers, she realized that her reputation was already destroyed. Perhaps it was time to show them exactly what kind of soldier they were judging so harshly. Sarah stood in the center of the gym, surrounded by 30 pairs of eyes that looked at her with mixtures of annoyance, disappointment, and outright mockery. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, though it was probably only seconds. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears as she made a decision that would change everything. You want to know about my back injury, Staff Sergeant? Sarah said, her voice cutting through the quiet gym with unexpected strength. You want to see the medical reality I'm dealing with? Rodriguez crossed his arms over his chest, his expression one of barely contained irritation. I want to see you stop making excuses and start acting like a soldier, Martinez. Without another word, Sarah reached for the bottom edge of her PT shirt. The movement caused a ripple of confusion through the watching soldiers, who weren't sure what they were about to witness. Some looked away instinctively, while others stared with curious anticipation. Sarah, what are you doing? Whispered Private Johnson, one of the few soldiers who had remained friendly toward her over the past week. But Sarah was beyond caring about protocol or propriety at this point. She lifted her shirt up to just below her shoulder blades, turning her back toward Rodriguez and the assembled soldiers. What they saw in that moment would stay with them for the rest of their military careers. Sarah's back was a roadmap of pain and survival. Dozens of small, dark scars dotted her skin like a constellation of suffering. But it was the larger scars that drew gasps from several soldiers, jagged lines that crisscrossed her lower back and shoulders, evidence of surgical procedures to remove some pieces of shrapnel while leaving others too dangerous to extract. The most shocking sight was the clearly visible bumps beneath her skin, where metal fragments remained embedded in her muscle tissue. Some pieces were small, barely noticeable, except for the slight discoloration they caused. Others were larger, creating visible lumps that shifted slightly when Sarah moved. Rodriguez's expression changed instantly from irritation to shock, then to something approaching horror as he realized what he was looking at. The gym had fallen completely silent, with even the background hum of the ventilation system seeming to quiet in respect for what was being revealed. "This is what happened during my last deployment," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the vulnerability of the moment. "Our convoy hit an IED outside Kandahar. I was thrown from the vehicle and landed in a field of metal debris from the explosion." She let the shirt drop back down, but the image of her scarred back was burned into everyone's memory. Several soldiers looked pale, while others couldn't seem to process what they had just witnessed. "The doctors removed what they could," Sarah continued, turning back to face Rodriguez. "But 37 pieces of shrapnel remain embedded in my back and shoulders. Some are too close to my spine to remove safely. Others have fused with muscle tissue over time." Rodriguez opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time since Sarah had known him, the confident staff sergeant appeared completely at a loss for what to say. "Every push-up feels like those metal fragments are cutting me from the inside," Sarah explained, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Rope climbing puts pressure on areas where shrapnel sits against nerve clusters. Bear crawls cause the embedded metal to shift and grind against my spine." Private Johnson stepped forward, his face full of concern and dawning understanding. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think you were just making excuses?" Sarah looked around the gym at faces that had completely transformed in the space of a few minutes. Where there had been judgment and mockery, she now saw shock, guilt, and in some cases, admiration for what she had endured. "The mission where I was injured is classified," she explained. "The medical records detailing my condition require special clearance to access. I couldn't just walk into the base hospital and get a note from a doctor without going through proper channels and revealing information I'm not authorized to share." Rodriguez finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Martinez, I had no idea. Why didn't you come to me privately and explain the situation?" The question hung in the air, and Sarah considered her response carefully. "Would you have believed me, Staff Sergeant? If I had come to your office and told you I couldn't do PT because I had shrapnel in my back from a classified mission, would that have seemed more or less believable than a simple back injury?" The truth of her words hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. He realized that she was probably right. Such an explanation would have sounded even more far-fetched than the excuses he had accused her of making. Sergeant Williams, one of the senior soldiers in the unit, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "Jesus, Martinez, I called you soft behind your back. I told people you were looking for easy ways out. I'm so sorry." Other soldiers began speaking up, offering apologies and expressing their shock at what they had learned. The soldier who had laughed loudest at Rodriguez's jokes about Sarah's condition now looked sick to his stomach. "How do you deal with the pain?" asked Corporal Davis, a young soldier who had been particularly vocal in his criticism of Sarah's apparent lack of effort. Sarah managed a weak smile. "Some days are better than others. Cold weather makes it worse. Stress and tension cause the muscles around the shrapnel to tighten, which increases the pain. I take medication when I can, but it makes me drowsy, so I try to avoid it during duty hours." The practical details of her daily struggle began to paint a picture for the assembled soldiers. They started to understand that what they had interpreted as laziness or weakness Was actually Sarah fighting through incredible pain just to show up and participate at all. Rodriguez looked around the gym at his soldiers, many of whom were clearly struggling with guilt over their treatment of Sarah. He knew he had to take responsibility for creating an environment where she felt unable to share her situation safely. "Martinez," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I owe you an apology. Not just for this week, but for creating a situation where you felt you couldn't trust me with the truth about your condition." Sarah nodded, accepting his words but still processing the emotional weight of what had just happened. "I understand why you reacted the way you did, Staff Sergeant. From your perspective, I was just another soldier making excuses." "That's not an excuse for how I handled this," Rodriguez replied firmly. "A good leader creates an environment where soldiers feel safe reporting medical issues, regardless of how unusual they might seem." The atmosphere in the gym had completely transformed. Where there had been tension and conflict, there was now a sense of unity and understanding. Soldiers who had spent the week avoiding Sarah were now gathering around her, asking questions about her experience and expressing genuine concern for her well-being. "What can we do to help?" asked Private Martinez, no relation to Sarah despite sharing the same surname. "How can we modify PT so you can participate without causing more damage?" The question opened up a discussion about alternative exercises and accommodations that could allow Sarah to maintain her fitness while respecting the limitations imposed by her injuries. Ideas flowed freely, as soldiers suggested different approaches, and Rodriguez took notes on potential modifications. "I've been doing physical therapy exercises that my doctor approved," Sarah explained. "They're designed to strengthen the muscles around the shrapnel, without putting direct pressure on the embedded fragments. Maybe I could demonstrate some of those techniques for anyone who's interested." The suggestion was met with enthusiasm from several soldiers who were curious about alternative fitness approaches. What had started as a confrontation had evolved into an educational opportunity that would benefit the entire unit. Rodriguez looked at Sarah with new respect and understanding. "Martinez, I want you to know that your service record speaks for itself. The fact that you've been dealing with this level of injury while continuing to serve is remarkable. That takes more courage than any PT exercise ever could." As the gym session concluded, soldiers approached Sarah individually to offer personal apologies and words of support. The soldier who had made the most cutting remarks about her condition was nearly in tears as he tried to express his regret. "I don't know how to apologize for the things I said," he told her. "You're tougher than any of us realized." Sarah accepted each apology with grace, understanding that her fellow soldiers had acted based on incomplete information. The experience had taught her something important about the power of truth, even when sharing it felt impossible or dangerous. Over the following weeks, the dynamic in the unit changed completely. Sarah became something of a mentor to younger soldiers who were dealing with their own injuries or challenges. Her story spread throughout the base, serving as a reminder that everyone fights battles that others cannot see. Rodriguez implemented new policies for handling soldiers with medical limitations, creating a more supportive environment for reporting health issues. Sarah's courage in revealing her condition had not only changed her own situation, but had made things better for countless other soldiers who would follow in her footsteps. The shrapnel scars on Sarah's back would never fully heal, but the wounds to her reputation and relationships with her fellow soldiers had been transformed into something stronger than they had ever been before. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon against misunderstanding is simply the courage to show the truth, no matter how difficult that revelation might be.